Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Quorn Local History Group and tonight's talk on the trail. This was originally given on the 28th of June 2021. My name is Dennis Marchant, and I will be taking you on an armchair visit to the Village Sculpture Trail. Welcome, everyone. So first of all, I should say that my interest in art and sculpture is only as a passing interest. I am certainly no expert on any of the items discussed, but I am aware of the number of works scattered around the village, and I began to research them as part of a history group project. So why was I interested in trying to record the artworks in Quorn? It was because I felt they were part of the village heritage, and they needed to be preserved, and I needed to highlight an interest in these to the general public. They are assets, and some of them are worth quite a bit of money, and I'd approached the parish council to see if they had any history about the works, and I found that they had very little, and some of them were not even recorded on their asset register. I'd spoken to quite a few people around the village, and it was true to say that a lot of people had some idea about some of the sculptures, but the general awareness was not so good. And so I wanted to try to make people, not make people, but encourage people in the village and visitors to become aware of the works of art that we have. Identification, sadly, very few of the works carry any identification at all. So you've no idea what you're looking at, who the sculptor was, or any of the background. I started work on it during the lockdown, and it was just a project really to keep me busy during the lockdown and the time spent indoors and at home. But I was spurred on when I started to read, as I expect some of you did, on social media, particularly families who were writing to say that they'd walked every walk they thought there was in the village, and their children were getting bored, and they felt that they needed a bit of stimulation. So I was spurred on to try to get this out there, the trail out there, and established for them. I also felt that there should be a tribute to the artist, and also a council's vision that was published back in the 90s, and which we'll talk about later. I also felt that there was a need to try to offer these works of art some protection, and I thought by publicizing them through a trail this would help. So this is what I mentioned, the village vision, if you like, from the village website, and it was written, I think, in the mid 90s by the parish council, and this is what it says: Quorn Village sculptures, whether works of art are judged a success depends on the point of view of the observer. Another measure is whether they stimulate discussion and controversy. Inevitably, the sculpture garden off the High Street and the figures and objects cited at other points around the village have done both. Stop sometime and take a good look. Make up your own mind. I think that's very good, and let's hope the works are stimulating. This particular, the picture on the left is an old one, and I should mention that what they call the sculpture garden has in fact changed, and these works are no longer situated in that garden, and the garden has now become known as Church View Gardens. So when I set off, I had little idea about any of the works of art, any background on them at all. I tried to piece together bits and pieces from people I knew and what the parish council had, but it was not anywhere near complete enough to publish. So I'd emailed the Loughborough University a couple of times because I knew that their students had been involved with some of the works in the village, and I hoped they might be able to help. But as I mentioned earlier, this was during the lockdown, and so my emails went unanswered until out of the blue one day, I had a response from Mr. David Bell, who is the program coordinator at LU Arts, and purely by coincidence, he'd come into the office, not to work, but to pick something up. But while he was there, he decided he would switch on his, the office computer, and there he saw my emails. So he got in touch straight away. And I have to say, without David's help and probably his drive as well, we wouldn't have the trail that we have today. It was David who put me in touch with this particular book, Public Sculpture of Leicestershire and Rutland, by Terry Kavanagh and Alison Yarrington. It's from 2000, so it's not that far out of date, and it lists nearly all, or hopefully all of the sculptures in the counties of Leicestershire and Rutland, and provided really useful background information, particularly for the works in Quorn that I was interested in. David also mentioned to me about the Loughborough University Sculpture Trail, which I have to say I wasn't aware of until this time, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So also, because David was able to supply me with the details of some of the sculptors, I was able to contact them by email, and they came back to me, most of them, and confirmed that what I was going to write about their works was in fact correct. And also most of what I talk about tonight has come from either the source of the sculptures themselves or from the book I mentioned. So just talking about the Loughborough University and their trail, sculpture trail. I don't know whether you've had the chance to visit or not, but if you haven't, I can highly recommend it. It's well worth a visit. I think it's 43 acres, obviously the site, but also over 40 sculptural works are there to view, and many of them by what are now famous sculptors. And it was thanks to a gentleman called Stuart Mason, and his time as Leicestershire's Director of Education. He encouraged all the, he had a vision that every educational establishment in Leicestershire and Rutland would have some form of art, mainly sculptures on their premises. Now, this one that you see here was one of the first that was established in the Loughborough University on the campus, and that was in 1971, and it was purchased for £375. It's from steel works, and it's entitled Abstract, and it's by the sculptor Bernard Shotlander, who became a very famous sculptor. In fact, it was one of his sculptures that we lost in Quorn. It was entitled 50/50, and as I say, it was by Bernard Shotlander, and it was constructed in metal as well and painted red, and I expect a lot of you remember seeing it because it was installed on the lawn of the old vicarage at Rawlins in 1968. Sadly, it was left to deteriorate, and by 2000 it was in a poor condition and had to be removed and scrapped. I found out afterwards, and I don't know if this is true, but I was told that it was probably valued about £20,000 when it was destroyed. It had been exhibited in London and toured before it had been purchased by the LCC under the scheme I mentioned. Now, Bernard Shotlander himself, he was born in Germany in 1924, and he came to the UK as a Jewish refugee in 1939. And during the war, he worked in a factory as a welder before taking up a course of sculpture at Leeds College of Art and subsequently moving to London to continue his studies. His training as a welder influenced his work heavily, and he described himself as a designer for interiors and a sculptor for exteriors. And I think also you can see from the previous work, and this one a very a Germanic influence on the work that he did. Moving on now to another sculpture that sadly we lost in Quorn, but this one we were as expected to lose. It's called Fox and Hound, and it was part of the Stafford Orchard refurbishment project in 2010. The sculpture of the Fox and Hound was started on the May Day event by carver Kevin Deegan, who is from Hungerton. It was expected to last 20 years, but sadly it didn't quite make it, and it was removed by 2018 when it had become rotten. The tree that it was carved into was being felled in any case, but from disease. But it was put there to try to draw people into the park after its refurbishment, and that certainly worked. And as I said, it was hoped to last 10 years, but it didn't quite make it. And apparently it was carved, as I said, in a chestnut tree, and that is not from a chestnut tree, sorry. And that apparently is not the best wood for carving. Now, I expect by now you're starting to think, well, when is he going to talk about the actual sculptures in Quorn that are still there and the trail itself? Well, I'm going to start with the village website. And when I put the work together originally, I didn't know what to do with it. So I touted it to various people, and luckily it was Sue Templeton from the history group and Tim, our webmaster, who worked together and thought that we should publish it and it should go on to the village website. So the page that you see, if you go onto the website, you click on sculptures, and you'll see a page which gives a background of where, a background to the trail and the accessibility, how to get there if you're arriving by bus, etc. We start at the Corndog Fox with the trail, which is really the transport hub now for Quorn, where all the buses stop. But I would say that the trail is accessible. It can also be joined anywhere. You don't have to start at the beginning. In fact, you don't have to do it all in one go. If you were to, it will probably take about an hour and a half. But you can get there by bicycle, by walking, by driving, or even riding your horse. They're all easily visible and accessible. Now, it's quite complex to get on the trail, and there are three. If you go onto the menu on the left-hand side where the arrow is, there are three headings, these being monuments, sculptures, and artifacts. And each one of those will give you the detailed background information to each of the items on the trail. And we're not going to go around every item today, and we're not going to go around the trail in a logical order. We're going to dart about a bit, but if you have managed to download the map, which you can do here, then you will see it's where we are around the village. But the best document, I think, is this one here, which is the Quorn Sculptures Walking Guide, which tells you some brief information about each item, where it is, and provides a picture. And it's quite useful to be able to either print off or read from your device and take with you. If you were to go under artifacts, for example, this is I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular one because it's not one we're dealing with, but it does tell you, give you an example of what you would find there. And this is the map itself. As I say, it's lettered from A through to O, and is where all our artworks are positioned around the village. And this is the document which I think is the preferred one. It's Quorn Sculptures Walking Guide. This has the map and the locations and also details of each piece of art. The Parish Council now have also added the Sculpture Walking Guide and the trail map to their website. You simply clock achievements and you get the menu, and at the bottom you will see village sculptures. So We're off on the trail now, and we're going to location L, which is in Stafford Orchard. And this sculpture is called Gurkha, and it's an interpretation of the sixth character from Punjabi script. It's made from Ancaster limestone, and obviously it's in the conservation area, so it's well, it has some protection. Its body is called Kaka, and this is an interpretation of the eighth character from Punjabi script. Ancaster limestone is used for churches and buildings, and Wallerton Hall is one example. It's good. It's a good material for sculptures as it's workable and stable. And these two works were both sculpted by Americawan. And here he is, here the artwork on this. He has a BA Honours Fine Art Sculpture from Loughborough. He has a BA Honours in Fine Art Sculpture from Loughborough College of Art and Design. As well as hosting exhibition, Amaritz is qualified in tutoring and community facilitation and hosts stone carving workshops. Amarit graduated from Loughborough University School of Art and Design in 1997 and continues to work as an independent artist and has several works cited throughout the country. You're going to see on the right here a very distinctive work, and it's called Dialogue, and it's a joint effort between Amarit and Lorraine Young. Lorraine is Programme Director for Fine Arts at the university, and this can be seen on the Loughborough University Sculpture Trail. And Lorraine also has provided works of art for Quorn, and we'll see one of those in a moment. So here's the joint works. It's quite large, as you can see, and it's entitled Dialogue. So here are the works that we were talking about, Gurkha and Gurkha, and they used to be in what was, as I mentioned, the sculpture garden, and they were moved into, they were sited there, I think, in 1997, and they cost £3,000 at the time, but they were moved to the new sensory garden when it was part of, or is part of Stafford Orchard, and it was part of the refurbishment program in 2009. But this picture here is actually a postcard that I found on eBay. It was issued by judges of Hastings, and I was taken actually by the title, which was Spirit of the Trees, Quorn, and it was photographed by Mrs. J.B. Watson of Gadsby, WI, and it was published by Leicestershire and Rutland Federation of Women's Institutes. And here they are today, situated in Stafford Orchard. They're very nice and works together there, and I must admit I often see people touching them, and I've seen children cuddling them as well, so I'm sure the sculptor will be pleased that their work has that effect. Okay, now this is the next work we're going to look at, and this one is location D, which is on the High Street. In fact, it's just outside of Quorn Court, and it was positioned there in 1998, and it cost the council £750. And this is the one that was, I mentioned Lorraine's work just now, and this is her work here. And again, it's from Ancaster limestone. It has some protection because it's in the conservation area again. And Lorraine said that the representations are of fire signs of the zodiac, Leo, Aries, and Sagittarius. And the work is carved from a single piece of Ancaster limestone split into three, each piece being named separately: dissipated energy, center of attention, and anxious achiever. Lorraine studied for her undergraduate program in sculpture at Loughborough College of Art and Design and holds a Master of Arts in Drawing. And she is now, as I mentioned before, Program Director of Fine Arts. This is one of the few of the sculptures that does have an identification plaque but you can see it's somewhat neglected at the bottom there. And the work itself is starting to deteriorate, which is a shame. It's starting to wear away. And I noticed the other day that a chunk had either been deliberately damaged or it had fallen off with time, and there it lays in a sad heap on the ground. Now, this is not a monument or a sculpture, although it was well known in the village for many years. It is the chimney from Wright's Mill. When it was no longer required, the company decided they would remove it, and it was taken down. But the then director, Mr. M. Wright, of Wrights and Sons, donated the millstone from the chimney to Loughborough College of Art and Design. And a competition was held between the students there to submit designs for possible sculptural works that could be situated around the village. The parish council themselves set up a committee to choose the 5 winning works, and they donated £1,000 for these works. The millstone grit from the chimney is a coarse granite sandstone from Derbyshire, and it can be found further north as well. And it had been used by sculptors since Saxon times. The first of the works we're going to look at is entitled Saddlestone, and the sculptor was Rachel Allen, and the material is the millstone grit from the chimney. And I'm going to mention there are 5 of these works, as I say, and I shall just say that as we go through, they were part of the millstone project rather than talk about all that detail each time. This one is in Churchview Gardens, location E on the map, and sadly we weren't able to contact Rachel Allen. Although there is a Rachel Allen still working as an artist in Truro, her name is spelled slightly differently, but we did email, but sadly there was no response. So if anybody does know any information, I should have mentioned that if you do know any information about any of the works or what we're saying is incorrect, whatever, we would love to hear. And because everything's electronically based, we can update it fairly easily. And it just proves that the trail has been used by people, because we've already had quite a bit of feedback, and some corrections have been made from the result of that. So Rachel said that the inspiration for this works was the Quorn hunt, and the sculpture is in the form of a saddle on a horse's back. The second work, also at this location in E and a part of the chimney project, is this one by Kevin Chadwick, and it's called Roots. Again, we were unable to contact Kevin, which is a shame, because this particular work, he said at the time that it was an abstract sculpture, and it was carved with forms based on tree roots, and probably those that you see along the River Soar on Soarside when the river level is fairly low. It has a bit of a story to it, this one. It was originally sited at the junction of Wood Lane and Leicester Road in Quorn, but it caused a bit of a stir, and according to the Loughborough Echo from the 5th of February 1999, it was received unfavourably by residents in the immediate vicinity, and some disliked its siting, while others found the carved shapes unpleasant and said they were suggestions of entrails or even a pile of dog dirt. The parish council at the time reacted to this and came up with a planting scheme to surround and disguise it. But nonetheless, one resident wrote again to the parish council, this time saying that they thought it was rude, reminding them of couples making love. So I'm not sure where they'd seen this, but who knows what goes on in that part of the village. In the end, it was resited to the sculpture garden, now Churchview Gardens, where it is certainly well suited, and I think it's appreciated by the insects and birds, as you can often see them drinking from the water pools that form in the natural hollows of the work. Still in the same location, and again from the chimney project. The artist this time is Alan Mulholland, and the work is entitled Leaning. Leaning is also part, as I say, of the chimney project, but the sculpture is in the form of a giant pine cone and was, Alan tells us, inspired by the tall pine trees growing nearby. It was sited here in 1999. Alan went on to gain a BA Honours in Fine Art Sculpture at Loughborough University and is now a Nottingham-based and manager of the Crocus Gallery. In 2002, Alan was awarded the Jaguar Sculpture Prize by the Royal Birmingham Society of Artists, and in 2009 was awarded a prize from Charnwood Design Awards for public art. Another of his works, shown here on the right, another works by Alan, can be seen at the Rothley Lodge roundabout. I suspect many of you have seen this fine piece, and it's called Mr. Johnson. We don't know if there's any relationship to the Prime Minister, but I shouldn't say this, but some people have mentioned that you can see through it. The fourth of the 5 chimney sculptures is this one, Arc 2, and this is by Michael Thacker. This one is at location J on your trail map, and that is in Stafford Orchard. Michael studied fine art at Loughborough, sculpture at Loughborough University, graduating in 1999. He went on to study stonemasonry at York College, where he was awarded the S&J Whitehead Award for stonemasonry. He spent 15 years working as a stone carver and mason at Lincoln Cathedral, but today he works full-time as a sculptor, using the act of gilding to bring his works to life. And in 2018, 2 of his pieces were chosen to be the feature sculptures at Chris Beardshaw's Royal Horticultural Society's Flower Show Garden, and we'll see a bit more of those in the moment. As I say, this particular works is in Stafford Orchard. It's often missed. In fact, I didn't realize it was there myself until I started the work on the trail, and it's down near the brook, so you need a nice one to go and search for. Here's Michael at work, and another one of his works can be seen in Barrow. It's called Broken Arc, and it's part of the village there, Barrow upon Soar Village Fossil Trail, and sits above the Old Man's Hospital garden entrance, which is near the church. As I say, Chris Beardshaw's Show Garden, this is an artist's impression here, was the winner of Best in Show Garden at the Chelsea Flower Show in 2018. And it was the Morgan Stanley Garden for NSPCC. Michael's sculptures, Curl and Yield 2, shown to the left and the right of this picture, were part of that winning design. The final of the chimney project works is this one, Trilobite. The artist is Sarah Spencer, and it's situated at location O, which is on the verge of the Barrow Road Farley Way roundabout. It was situated there in 1999. Sarah's theme was based on the fossil finds which in the area was famous for, and that's similar to Michael's was as well. His was I failed to mention that at the time, but his was based on the vertebrae of a large mammal that had been found there. And a related work by Sarah titled Trilobite 2 is situated also in Barrow upon Soar as part of their fossil trail. Sarah was born in 1972 and she graduated from Loughborough University School of Art and Design in 1999 with a first-class honours degree in sculpture. Since then, she's worked in special effects and has been an exhibition coordinator, and she also works at Aberystwyth University. She won the Henry Moore and Royal College of Art Figuring Sculpture Award and has an MA in art from the Aberystwyth School. She's exhibited her work in several places around the country. So now we're going to meet Graham Mitchison, and Graham has done quite a bit of work with us in the village, it turns out. He's pictured on the left of the screen here at his workshop, which is at Quorn near Colville. He tends to work in big projects, as you can see, and he sat on one of his recently completed works there. But he actually graduated from Loughborough back in 1995, and as I say, he's worked with Quorn for several times, and here he is. He can be seen in the courtyard at Rawlins Academy working with some students on some works, which we'll talk about in a moment. And here they are. These are, as I say, they're sculptured by Graham Mitchison, but he likes to say that they were designed and mostly carved by the students themselves. They were set where they are in 2010, and they're used as seats, very popular with the students at the academy. This is location P, Rawlins Academy, on your trail, but this one, the courtyard is in private property, and so though you can see it during open days and things like that, you have to make an appointment to go in to see it under normal circumstances. In 2014, Graham was commissioned by David Wilson Holmes to produce a series of 6 granite sculptures, and 25 tons of granodiorite was purchased from Mount Sorrel Quarry here in Quorn. And Graham was assisted by our own artist Joe Shepherd, and they worked with the village schools to produce sketches and sculpture ideas. There were some 140 Year 5 and Year 6 students from both St Bartholomew's School plus Rawlins Academy art students, and they joined together to produce their own sketches and sculpture ideas. And the resulting proposals were presented to the village at a public consultation held in the church rooms in 2015. And the selected works are still placed and are still there at the Fenny Copse Sculpture Park. This is an aerial shot from a drone operated by my grandson, actually, and you can see from here these are 4 of the works. There are 6 altogether. Unfortunately, you can't see the other 2. One is on the bottom of the picture, just out by the footpath. We'll see it in a moment. And another one is tucked off to the left under the trees. You can see the footpath rising up over the A6 to join the slabs on the right-hand side there. And Fenny Copse is location N on the map. This is probably the most familiar of the works there. It's called Community of Foxes, and as I said, it's location N and by Graham Mitchison, but the design was by the students in the village. It's very striking and has become more so as the stones have aged, and also they reflect the light changes. As I say, it's called Community of Foxes, and it's only just recently that I discovered that there are more foxes in the lower levels of the works, which sometimes, if it's in bright sunshine, don't show up too well, but you can clearly see them in this picture. 2 other works relate to deer. One of them is called Resting Deer, and the other one is called Standing Deer, and brackets muntjac. The resting deer were often seen at the time in Fenny Copse, and the muntjac deer were very familiar in the village in 2015 and have been seen again recently quite regularly in the Budden Lane area and Chadney Road area of the village. There are 2 designs based on flowers. One is called Flowers, simply Flowers, and the other one is called Flowers 2. The final piece in the collection is called Collection of Bats, and this one I know is often missed. People don't see it as it stood back under the trees, a little bit out of the way. Graham has established himself as a popular sculptor, and he has several of his works at the National Arboretum, and including this one which he supplied as the picture of the latest one, and this is the memorial to the Naval Service. Okay, so now we're going to dart over to the other side of the trail, and we're outside or near the Corndog Fox. What would be one of the first works that you would see if you were starting the trail there, and it's map location A. This is the Queen Elizabeth II Silver Jubilee Sculpture Memorial, and it's by local sculptor Peter Brookman. And the idea of came about because they felt at the time that a permanent Jubilee memorial would be a good idea, and this was decided on in a village public meeting which had been called to discuss the future of the remaining funds that were left following the Jubilee commemorations. A suggestion was made by Mr. Early that the money should be contributed to the parish council scheme to convert this piece of land, which at the time was known at the library site as the library site, because it was hoped we would have a new library built there, but that didn't come to fruition, and so it should be known as the Jubilee Garden. It was decided that at least part of the money should also be used to buy a plaque or a small monument for the garden to commemorate the 1977 Jubilee. Wing Commander Brookman, who actually is quite a community figure, he'd been on the parish council for some years, and was also chairman of various trusts and committees. He'd also famous, probably you're aware that from our own Facebook website and Remember Quorn and the museum websites for the vintage footage, video footage of Loughborough and Quorn, and indeed from this particular Jubilee celebration. So those were from the 1950s, 60s, and through to the 70s, very valuable snippets of film recorded history. But Peter himself suggested that young people in the area be asked to submit designs for the work, and this is what came about. It's interesting that behind the work there's also a plaque that gives some information about the site, about the area, the bank, and the cottages on the bank are described, that the buildings that used to be there before they were demolished. So that's something to have a look at around the back of the memorial that's normally missed. As a result of putting this on the trail, a lady came forward to inform us that Peter Brookman was also owner of a company at Rothley, an engineering company, but he did sculptures as a hobby, and his garden, which was once featured on Gardener's World in Paddock Close, Quorn, was full of sculptures, and that's why that and the flower displays attracted Gardener's World to show his garden in one of their programs. Very near to that memorial is the bat sculpture. This is location B. This is by artist and sculptor Martin Heron, and is made from steel. The high number of bat species found in Quorn were celebrated with this sculpture, and I think there's 6 of the species of the bats found in Quorn represented there, including one of England's rarest, the Leisler bat. It was commissioned to reflect these species and was unveiled on the 18th of October 2000 by Councillor Neville Baird, then Mayor of Charnwood. In 2013, the Parish Council funded a nearby granite plinth and the plaque. So this is another one of the few works that does have a plaque. As I say, the material used was steel, and it was designed by Martin Heron in collaboration with members of Stepping Out and the Socially Willed Active Group from the Rawlins Community College, now Rawlins Academy. The creation was funded through Charnwood Borough Council's Biodiversity Community Art Programme. Martin himself was originally from Northern Ireland, but he now lives in Nottinghamshire and is a member of the Royal British Society of Sculptors. And most of his works are in still and can be found outdoors in public places. Another of Martin's works, called Chariot, was situated at Thurmaston, but unfortunately I don't have a picture of that. Interestingly, as I mentioned, we had feedback from people who've been on the trail, and a lady who was studying or is studying at Glasgow University the environment and biodiversity had come home because of lockdown to stay with her parents, and was on the trail when she came across the plaque that I mentioned, and she read about a bat species that she'd never heard of, and it turns out that the word Liesla has been misspelled on the plaque. So whether that will be changed or not in the future, I don't know. If you walk on down the high street to location F on the map, is a grade 2 listed a building. It's the old Bull's Head, and this was a coaching inn that was established way back in 1740. It's now a block of flats, and it's owned by Quorn guest houses. And they've recent years they've had this wonderful work restored. Unfortunately, we know little about it other than the material is stone and it has a copper ring through the bull's nose. But it's really an excellent site. And if you walk down the high street towards the village on the left-hand side, just take a look up and you'll see it. And if the sun is shining, it looks really splendid. A more modern works, this was situated is situated at the former Wakeley's bakery site and development, and it was sited there in 2006 and using a reclaimed cornstone. And there was apparently a plaque that went with it, but that was never installed and has since has gone missing. Interestingly, the designers of the development, Michael Perry and David Granter, are still in existence, and I emailed them to ask about this, and it wasn't quite what was originally envisaged. They'd asked the parish council for suggestions for a piece of public art to be situated on the site, and they only came back to say that a cornstone would be useful because it would reflect the former site's use as a bakery and also the village name. But it was left to the designers to put this together. And that's location H on the map. This is probably one of the more famous of our works, the Handstand, which again is in Stafford Orchard, and this is map location I. The sculptor was Ben Greenwood, and the material is bronze. Ben was commissioned by the parish council to design and produce a work as part of the Stafford Orchard 2010 refurbishment project. It was funded by the National Lottery, and £16,000 was allocated for the work. The village was consulted to get some idea of what they would require, but there was a mixed response or an equal response for all the various categories that were listed, and inevitably the community divided its votes between them, and so at the end the development team for the park decided what the final work would be with the help of Ben. Ben had gained a BA Honours in Graphic Arts from Leeds Metropolitan University, and he began his career as working as an animator on Aardman Animations, where he worked on Wallace and Gromit, Creature Comfort, Tortoise versus the Hare, and The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and many other of the Wallace and Gromit works. He's also well known for his totem style pieces. And this sculpture, he says, integrates the themes of children at play, water, dog walking, and the park's history and its wildlife. It was cast by LeBlanc Studios at Saxby near Melton Mowbray. And a subtle bat and Q motif appear in the children's pocket. Ben is proud of this work, he says, and it still features on his website. And obviously, sculpturing the clay, once it was agreed, it had to be translated into life-size design in clay as individual molds. The design was too large to cast economically in one piece, so individual molds of the main design elements were made, and then they were joined together later. Casting molten metal was poured into each mold. And as I say, Ben is proud of this creation, and it can be seen still on his website. They now move to the junction of Stoop Lane and Saw Road to location M on your map. And this one is a memorial as opposed to a sculpture. And it was dedicated to Diana, Prince of Wales, who tragically died in a car accident in Paris in 1997. She was the first wife of Charles, the Prince of Wales, and her death had a deep impact on the royal family, British society, and also the people here in Quorn. And they decided they would like to have a memorial dedicated to Diana, and this one was chosen to be that. And the bed was built on the junction of the roads, and several others similar beds were built around Quorn at the time with the proceeds from the Quorn Open Gardens weekend, which were donated to the parish council for the purpose. Sadly, as you can see from the picture on the left, it became overgrown and often covered in weeds, and the flowers disappeared and were replaced by shrubbery, which was really quite untidy. But once we had the trail underway, it helped to get the village to try to improve it. And the WI evening group asked the parish council if they could attend to the bed and get it back to something like its former glory. And they started work on that in April this year. And as you can see, it's starting to look somewhat better, and the memorial is on display there. Interestingly, behind the Lady Di memory plaque is another plaque, which they came across by accident, and most people must have probably forgotten that it was even there. It's difficult to read, but it's a Best Kept Village Award. And what it says is translated Best Kept Village Award, Corndog, 1997. Best of previous winners, intermediate and large villages section, organised by Leicester Mercury and Leicestershire Rural Community Council. We're getting towards the end of the sculptures and memorial I've selected for you this evening, and this one, the Corndog Cenotaph, is probably very appropriate that we talk about this one, as it is 100 years old in July. The sculpture was Herbert Morecambe, and its material is Portland whitbed stone. The owner is the Corndog Parish Council, and it is in itself a Grade 2 listed memorial, and its map location is G, which is at the cross, and I'm sure most people notice it as they drive through the village. It was built by public subscription, which started they started having meetings about a memorial in 1919, and they raised the cost of this was all raised by public subscription, and it was £543. And as I say, this year marks the centenary of its unveiling, which took place, we're told, on a warm and sunny Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock on the 24th of July 1921, when the Barrow Silver Band accompanied hymn singing and the unveiling, which was carried out by Colonel Toller. The memorial shortly after the unveiling is shown in this picture, and it was commented on at the time that the memorial looked very striking with its bright white stone, contrasting dark slate and beautifully gilded lettering and decoration. It was designed by Samuel Perkins Pick, who sadly died in 1999, so never got to see the memorial actually in place. He worked for a company called Pick, Everett and Key. Obviously, he was a partner there, and the sculpting and stonemasonry work was carried out by Joseph Herbert Morecambe. He passed away in 1942. The description reads, for the Grade 2 listing, that it is a large square column made from Portland whitbed stone, which is a very durable stone and has a unique fossil structure. St. George is carved on the top front face, with the Great War slate plaques on the front and rear faces containing 76 names. The whole sits on a two-tiered base. An additional slate plaque was added on one side after the Second World War, and a further 19 names. Samuel Pick himself was born in Kettering, and he was the son of a local vet. He went on to study at the grammar school, and while there, two notable Leicestershire watercolour artists, Harry Ward and John Fullylove, encouraged him to produce drawings of buildings because they thought he was particularly good at that. And he went on to be an architectural apprentice working with Everard, and he became an assistant teacher at Leicester School of Art as well. He entered in partnership with the company, which we now know as Pick, Everett and Key, and they're still in existence today. The Pick Everett head office is at Helford House in Charles Street, Leicester, where they employ more than 500 people, providing consultancy services for property and construction. Joseph Morecambe was born near Wrexham, the sculptor, and he worked first for a local firm of stonemasons and later became assistant modelling master at the Leicester School of Art. 4 years later, he bought the firm of stonemasons and monument sculptors, Pearson and Shipley, who were based at Newark in Leicester, and he renamed the company the Plasmatic Company. The cenotaph itself was constructed by a local builder, William Henry Fuchs, who had continued the family building business, having been apprenticed to his father, Benjamin Fuchs. This picture is of the work at the last Remembrance Day in 2019. Obviously, because of lockdown, there's not been another one, but hopefully there'll be a full parade again later this year. You can see the sculptor of St. George at the top there and the gold lettering. And as I mentioned, it's 100 years old. It's 100 years since the unveiling on the 24th of July. So we're now at the end of the trail, but what of the future? Well, personally, I'd like to see the information plaques applied to all of the works, and we have put a proposal together to the parish council, and when funds are available, hopefully they will be identified. We have the Queen's Platinum Jubilee coming up next year, and who knows, maybe an apt way to commemorate that in the village would be with a sculpture work. Just mentioning that we will be adding to the trail as we discover more pieces, and this particular plaque, which we call the 1948 plaque, it actually says on it, this children's playground was established in 1948 by public subscription as a tribute to the men of Quorn who gave their lives during the war 1939-45, and whose names are inscribed on the memorial in the centre of the village. This piece, I was going to say, was dumped in the village hall, but probably that's the wrong word, but it had been placed in the village hall. The plaque was unreadable, really, and nobody knew too much about it. When the village hall was going to be redecorated during the lockdown, we felt that it could well get thrown out. So it was rescued, and thankfully one of the council's employees, Danny Stevens, has done a great job in restoring it back to its original form, when we can now read the wording on it quite well. And it's made from bronze, and it's going to be placed probably on the wall of the old school with a heritage plaque, and we'll also get that added to the trail. So as I say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this selection of the Quorn Sculpture Trail. I do hope that you've enjoyed it, and you'll remember and please, if you have any feedback, then please don't hesitate. We'd love to have it. And remember what the vision said at the beginning: stop sometime, take a good look, and make up your own mind. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and bye for now. Bye.